Good evening, everyone. My name is Gyan Bhamhani, and I am the host of the Entrepreneurship Insights Podcast. This evening, we are here with young entrepreneur Hriday Sheth, and he's a valedictorian of Granada High School, class of 2021. And Hriday continues to wow others with his accomplishments and ventures. Hey, Hriday, it's a pleasure having you on the podcast this evening.
Hi, Gyan. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's an honor to be here, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So my first question is, how did you get started as an entrepreneur, right? Where did you start? Where are you now?
Yeah, so, it's an interesting story. So I did pretty well in the SAT, and there were a bunch of like friends and parents' moms and things like that asking me, tutor them, they'll pay me, things like that. So I did that a little bit, tutored some friends with math, got some money that way. And I did that for, a couple of weeks. And I was like, I'm technically an entrepreneur, but really I'm not creating a product that, is creating a profit. I'm just selling my time. And so at that point, I realized that, there's, different things that are considered entrepreneurship, but my true passion is creating products that people use that enable you to make money while you sleep, right? So I sort of then wanted to pivot. I didn't like selling my time. I wanted to make something that people wanted to use. And so that's how I sort of wanted to create a startup and got into Hieroglyph.
Yeah, so you mentioned how you started tutoring, and honestly, I also got started with that, right? I also started tutoring, selling my time. But really, when you're young, what else can you do, right? You don't have money, you don't have capital where you can be, oh, I'm going to invest in this and I'm gonna bring it up, right? You have to start. You either have an opportunity of investing your money or your time, and you chose time, and here you are. And you mentioned hieroglyph, which we will get into later. So, what do you enjoy most about this entrepreneurship lifestyle? What about the aesthetic appeals to you?
So it's a double-edged sword for sure. But I would say what I enjoy the most is that there's no one telling you what to do. In the sense that, you're like at school, you're told, do this assignment, learn this content, you'll pass the test, or, study this and you'll get this grade. But with entrepreneurship, it's really, an open road in the sense that there's no one telling you what to do. You're steering the ship. And so it's very fun in the sense that there's freedom, there's flexibility, and, you could take the company in different directions and you can lead that. But it's a double-edged sword in the sense that it comes with a lot of responsibility, and you have to have internal motivation to push yourself, because there's not going to be someone telling you, you need to have this assignment done, but it's on you to be like, okay, we need to do this to get more users, or we need to implement these features. So yeah.
That's interesting. I've interviewed three other entrepreneurs, and they've described it in a different way. And like you, with a younger perspective, you've also described it in a different way, that it's an open road. You get to decide where you're going, and actually, you may decide where to pave that road, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah, so you decide where to place those bricks, you decide where you want to go, right? So, what are your future plans in the field? What other ventures interest you? Like, where do you see yourself in the future with in regards to entrepreneurship?
So this is kind of, going to sound a little bit ambitious, but I feel like, there's vast swaths of our economy that have yet to be digitized. And that's something that we don't experience here in Silicon Valley, where everything is all about tech. But if you look at some things like, shipping and logistics, cargo moving across the world, things like that, all of these are huge, trillion-dollar industries, multi-trillion-dollar industries, but they're still very, slow to change. Like, even real estate, how properties are bought and sold, things like that, that's still a little bit old school in the sense how those transactions are conducted. So there's huge chunks of our economy that have yet to be digitized that could use a lot of automation and being pushed forward. And so I don't have any, exact North Star yet in terms of what industry or what problem I want to solve, but I want to be using technology, whether that's software or robotics or really anything, to push industries forward, and create new efficiencies, create new value, and make and I know this sounds cliche, and make a better world.
Don't worry, it's not cliche. Everyone wants that. In everyone's heart, everyone, like, we all want a better world to live in for future generations, right? And you mentioned pushing technology forward with whatever learning that you have done and you are going to do. So you're going to study electrical engineering and computer sciences at Berkeley. So how do you plan on using this, uh, utilizing this new learning in Hieroglyph, your company, which we'll talk about, and for any other future businesses or startups that you may want to found?
Yeah, so for Hieroglyph specifically, I'm looking forward to learning a lot about, so in the sense that, okay, so I'll, start from the beginning, but, Hieroglyph is an online platform. So we built the platform with what we knew, which was a stack using React, Redux, and Firebase. And so at Berkeley, I look forward to learning new methodologies, learning, about SQL databases and NoSQL databases, and about, expanding my scope into different languages and things like that, so that I can implement, optimal tech stacks and languages and things like that when we're developing Hieroglyph, as opposed to just what you know. And, as a high schooler, there's so much out there. You learn programming in class. You can learn a little bit of web development outside of class and things like that. But I'm looking forward to expanding my horizons and learning a lot of different, even database structures and design and things like that. Because definitely as a high school entrepreneur, sometimes without a formal computer science education, you're limited in what you can and can't build. And the other thing I'm looking forward to is learning about data science and machine learning and things like that, so that we could implement those algorithms within Hieroglyph to do things like retain users, and things of that nature. These are things that Facebook and LinkedIn and Google do very well, building their own algorithms in terms of what to display to users, and that, creates content that people want to see and keeps users on these platforms. And, if I was able to learn a lot about these algorithms and machine learning and things like that, I hope to implement these technologies within Hieroglyph to boost user retention and create a better user experience.
Those are some, what do you call it? Feisty ideas, right? You're expanding your horizons as an entrepreneur. It is vital, and that you continuously learn new things, right? And you're young, you you hope to learn much more, so you can improve Hieroglyph, and uh, that's honestly awesome, right? So you described Hieroglyph as just an online platform. Would you mind going into more detail on what purpose does it serve, and how does it what service does it provide its users?
So Hieroglyph right now is a collaborative interview preparation platform specifically for quantitative finance. So our actual web platform, which you could access on hieroglyph.com, you can see interview like practice quant finance interview questions, submit solutions to the questions, and then see how other users have solved them, comment on other users' solutions, and then have other users, read your solutions, comment, things like that. So it's an interview preparation platform with a lot of practice problems, but it also heavily emphasizes community and being able to learn from other users. And then on top of, the core web platform, we also have our newsletter, which gives all of our subscribers quant finance internship opportunities right to their inbox. So, what internships have opened up, whether it's at Jane Street or at Citadel, things like that, as well as, just some resources that you send out through the newsletter. And then the last thing that we have as a part of Hieroglyph is our Discord server. And so that has a spot where users can discuss with one another how their different interview experiences have gone, can solve problems together on the Discord as well, and just a place to hang out and maybe even do open source projects. So yeah.
That sounds really complex, but in what my takeaway is that you're bringing a whole community together through Discord, through collaboration, through newsletters. You're basically making a section of the world a better place, right? And everyone wishes to expand that, right? So by basically providing resources uh, and other things to what do you call it, to the future, to the future of quantitative finance, right? So that's fascinating. How did how did this idea start? Like, who thought of it, and how did you decide at first to implement on it?
Yeah, so I did competitive math in high school, and so there is a centralized community for competitive math. It's called Art of Problem Solving, AOPS. And so that's a website where, people in competitive math can go talk to other users, post on forums, solve problems together, things like that. And it was a great source of centralization and community, especially for people who are just getting started with competitive math and things like that. So I started to get interested in quant finance a little bit last summer, and I was looking into it, and there were some different forums online like QuantNet and things like that. But those are really geared towards existing quants, people in the industry talking about, their compensation packages, their switching jobs, things like that. But there wasn't really a community for people interested in quant, looking to break into the field, thinking about going into quant finance, people who want to prepare for their quant finance interviews, potentially get a quant finance internship. So sort of recognizing that market need, that there needs to be a one-stop shop, like a collaborative platform for people to get started with quant finance, motivated me to get to create Hardglove.
That's a really strong purpose, and I'm sure it must have served you well in pushing through all the obstacles and getting your service out there, I'm sure. So, what advice do you have for teens thinking about entering the startup field, right? You noticed a problem in the market, that there isn't a community for these for the people interested in quant finance, and you took advantage of that. So what advice do you have for teens and maybe other entrepreneurs who are interested in founding a startup of their own?
I would say the most important thing is identifying a market need. I mean, I don't know, there's a lot of different pieces of advice I could give. And again, I'm just a beginner too. So there's a lot of advice that I could receive that I would really benefit from. But just there's a couple of different things that I'd like to point out from my experience. Again, I'm a newer entrepreneur. I'm a younger entrepreneur. So I'd recommend all your users all your listeners to take this with a grain of salt. But the number one thing I'd say is identifying a market need. And because a lot of times, you could get carried away with a project you want to build, start building, getting feature creep, implementing new features, start building, but then you don't but then you're not actually solving a market need. Either a problem that you think exists does not exist, or there are competitors that have established a monopoly or strong footings into the market you hope to get into. So I would say make sure that there's a market need for what you're building. And that does not mean there has to be no competitors. A few competitors is fine. But if somebody's so good at what you're trying to do that they've created a monopoly around it, then that's probably not a good space to enter, right? Deciding to create a new search engine is probably not going to work out so well when you have Google getting the vast majority of traffic. But I think just identifying a market need, what they say, build what people want, is the most important thing. So just make sure you do a lot of demand validation before you start building anything, just to make sure that you're going to build something people want, and there's going to be demand for what you build. So that's number one. Number two would be take baby steps along the way to, provide an indication that you are making progress, and to also just help validate the demand at a lower cost or an earlier phase. So before we fully launched the Hieroglyph platform at hieroglyph.com, we had a newsletter. And it was just a landing page on hieroglyph.com that you could enter in your email and get on the newsletter. So we had a lot of people get on our newsletter very fast. And then we had a great open rate for our newsletter, 50, 60% for lots of the newsletters, which is very, very good for newsletters. And so that was huge demand validation, and even early product market fit, which was something super easy to set up with MailChimp and a quick landing page. And, that gave us the motivation to carry on and keep coding our web platform, which, eventually launched a few weeks ago. And, even in retrospect, what I would say is I would have wanted that newsletter and the landing page to be up even before we started building Hieroglyph at all. Because in the beginning, we were carried away. We were like, we're going to build this, this, and this. And we started building so much after market research that at a certain point, we need to step back and be like, okay, we need to start getting our demand together, start getting our base so that we have, some traction even as we launch the product. So we got that landing page, we got that newsletter set up. And like I said, I wish we did it even earlier, but I'm glad that, we got the newsletter and a bunch of subscribers and the landing page up before we launched. So, so to sum things up, I'd say, find ways to do demand validation and create product market fit at a low cost, low effort type of things. And that'll really help you out in the long run. So even for like the interview preparation platform with like problems and things like practice problems and things like that, after we did the newsletter, we were also like, let's create a Discord server. And so in that Discord server, what we had is we had practice problems that people would comment and solve and things like that. And that also took 5-10 minutes to set up, very fast to do. And then, lots of people were engaging, solving the problems, discussing with one another. And that was, again, another form of product market fit and demand validation before we had even launched product. So just find ways to do quick demand validation and getting traction before you create your mega project that you launch. And then the third thing I'd say is your team is everything. So make sure that you have good relationships with people in your team. Make sure that it's not transactional relationships where one co-founder does this and the other co-founder does this. And in order to keep the relationship going, both must be meeting certain criteria. Keep the co-founding team relationship driven, that people feel motivated to do well because they want to do well and enable their other co-founders to succeed. And being flexible with your other co-founders and holding yourself accountable. So a good team dynamic isn't one where co-founders are checking each other and being like, you should be doing this, and getting told by your co-founder, I should be doing this. The co-founders to each other should be flexible with another, but you internally as a co-founder should have the drive to succeed, pushed forward by your commitment to your co-founders and wanting to succeed for them. So yeah, that's just the quick early advice I'd say that I got from this.
Wow, that's really insightful advice. And my takeaway is that entrepreneurship teaches many soft skills that are really important for real life. Like you said, teamwork, right? Being able to carry your co-founding team and maintaining a good relationship with others, maintaining a good relationship with your network, your connections. And so, and about the demand valuation, I probably should have done more of demand valuation before releasing this podcast. I did like, hey, would you like to listen to this? Is this something that may interest you? But I probably should have done it a little bit more now that I'm listening to you, right? So thank you again for that insightful advice. So you created Hieroglyph in a moderately competitive market. So do you have any other advice on how to stand out, how to make your startup or business stand out in the competition, as long as you're not entering a monopoly?
Yeah, so I would say see what other people don't, and that makes the competition much lower. Because if you look at it from an outsider's perspective, you're 10 feet away looking at Hieroglyph. You're like, oh, Hieroglyph is in a market with a ton of interview preparation resources. There's LeetCode and Glassdoor and HackerRank and things like that. Like, how is Hieroglyph going to succeed? There's so many resources. But you have to take a step closer and look at niches that are large, but that nobody has capitalized on yet. And that will enable you to create your own monopoly in whatever space you choose to enter. So quant finance, specifically people breaking into quant finance, was something where there were no resources. There were no, I mean, there are resources, but there were no community-based platforms. There was no centralized spot to get internships and a community and things like that. So that was assigned to us that we needed to act and capitalize on that market inefficiency. So I would just say, like, even in a competitive market, see what other people don't and capitalize on niches that have not been capitalized on yet. And, be the supply to meet the demand. And that'll enable you to succeed.
Wow, I really don't know what to say to this. Usually I have something, hey, on the top of my words, but man, just see what other people don't. And I guess that may be, in retrospect, one of the secrets to entrepreneurial success on how to stand out, creating your own blue ocean, right? Being in that bigger niche, but also creating your own small niche so you're able to grow with it, right? So again, thank you. So what do you, my last question is, what advice do you have uh, uh, for students about using their time and relationships, especially teens and connections and opportunities? So especially for teens who are just getting into college applications, who are exploring career interests. So what advice do you have for them to just explore more?
Is this for students in general or aspiring entrepreneurs?
Aspiring entrepreneurs and people who and students who haven't found their path yet.
So there's a lot that comes to mind. Do you mind if I just go off for a second?
Yeah, feel free to do whatever you want or say
Yes.
whatever you
Okay.
want.
So I would say a couple different things. So number one, um, it's all about drive and internal motivation. So your desire to see a change in the market, your desire to do well for your co-founders, your desire to see your company succeed. So pick things that keep you up at night, that it's midnight, you're in bed and you're doodling ideas on your sketch pad or whatever. Find out what that fire is and let that fire drive you. And at that point, once you've found that fire, once you've found that internal motivation, what you do will be hard, but it won't feel like work. So find that fire, find what drives you, find the problems you want to solve, find the people you want to solve them with, and just have a blast and just go for it. So that's number one. Number two, don't worry if you fail, because trying something and failing, by trying something and failing, you're doing a much greater good to society than not trying at all. Society has been driven forward by people who take risks, by people who, push ideas, bring new products to market, and serve as transformational figures. And a lot of the time, people are afraid to take risks and create ventures and bring products to market and create change because they're afraid of failure. But it's important to not be afraid of failure, because by even trying to change the market or bring something that people want, by trying to create a company and giving it your all, regardless of whether you fail or succeed, you will have gone through something that will push society forward, either in the sense that you have created something that people want, people use it, you're serving, you're capitalizing on a niche and boom, you're successful. Or if you don't succeed, you provided a data point for other people to look at and be like, this did not work. We need to take it another direction, which is also very important for progress in society. So just never be afraid, keep going. Don't be afraid to fail. Yeah, I mean, and by the way, in today's climate, failing is not a big deal. Like, you can do a startup, get venture funding, fail, and then create another startup, and the same investors will be all over you again. You could do that again and again and again. Part of that, again, is relationships with the investors. If the investors like you, then they'll keep going for your ideas. But especially in today's climate, it is 100% okay to fail. There's free money for every company. I mean, it's just, the climate is ridiculous right now, so you should just go for it. There's never been more opportunity. So just keep going forward and don't look back. Third thing I'd say is, like, I think for entrepreneurship, at the end of the day, your drive matters the most, but going to a college that has a good entrepreneurship scene is going to be beneficial in the sense that it'll provide you more access to angel investors and startup funding, and helps build out your network early on. And so that's, you can be 100% successful without going to a very startup driven college, but going to a startup driven college, or a college with lots of entrepreneurs, does help. It has a network effect. So the schools with big entrepreneurship scenes, right, like MIT, Stanford, Berkeley, Harvard, are great options if you are interested in entrepreneurship, because they'll provide a lot of the network and the contacts that will help you succeed. But again, if you don't go to one of these colleges, that's 100% fine too. But I like the TLDR I'd say is, like, I guess when you're looking at colleges, keep an eye on the colleges with big entrepreneurship scenes, because that will help you. Another thing I'd say is just don't hesitate to try things, right? When I was in the beginning of creating Hieroglyph, people were like, you're a high school student. How are you going to create something that is geared towards college students, etc.? And people were, a few business mentors were like, you should wait to start this. It's not necessarily the right time, but I sort of went for it. And, the first contacts I did for market research were just cold messages on LinkedIn and things like that, cold messaging quants. And eventually I got my two co-founders to join, who actually were in college, who are 2 years older than me, to get on board with Hieroglyph. And, that really kickstarted our progress. But that too, if I quit in the beginning, there would be no Hieroglyph. And I'm just glad I persisted and, went forward and cold messaged people and just kept hustling, because at this point now with Hieroglyph, we have, achieved some sense of product market fit. And I think we're on a good path. So just, even if you're building something that people are saying, this is not going to work, you're not the right person to build this, things like that, just don't be stopped. Let your fire drive you and go from there. Yeah.
There was a lot to unpack there, right? The fact that, hey, don't be afraid to take risks. And you said that in this climate, failing is okay, but it's always been okay. It's always been okay to fail and try again. But it's just that we aren't we aren't open to that type of failure. And your advice reminded me of one quote: "You see 100, or sorry, you lose 100% of opportunities you don't take," right? And entrepreneurs like yourself are always ecstatic, or are always glad with their decision to let, or to decide that, hey, I have that fire in me and nothing can stop, right? And the networking effect, right? Where one connection leads to 10 more, but each one leads to 10 more, right? And suddenly you have such strong relationships with people all over the world, right? And like, you started Hieroglyph with just cold messaging on LinkedIn. I also started this entrepreneurship, this Entrepreneurship Insights Podcast by cold messaging, right? I cold messaged you, I cold messaged many other people, right? So
Wait a second. For some reason, there's a speaker in this room that's getting progressively louder music. Do you mind if I go quickly stop it?
yeah, sure, go ahead. Yeah, so as long as you have that fire and that motivation, that drive in you, really nothing can stop you. As cliche as it sounds, it is an undenying fact.
Yeah,
So
and
yeah,
a lot of entrepreneurs who have had their one success had failed time and time again before succeeding. Even Justin Kahn had one startup before Twitch, and obviously Twitch got bought for almost $1 billion, but he had one startup before that raised 3.7 million dollars, and that failed. And then he did Twitch, which was a success, and then he went into Atrium, which then failed and raised 75 million. But he tries and he tries again, he succeeds. So just never be afraid to fail, and don't feel guilty if you fail.
yeah, wonderful. And again, I'd like to thank you. And with these last pieces of advice, I would like to conclude this interview. And again, thank you, Hriday, for this opportunity to interview you about your interests, your ventures, Hieroglyph, and how you have succeeded in your own blue ocean, your own niche as a young entrepreneur. So again, thank you, Hriday, for giving us the opportunity to learn insights into um, on your entrepreneurial uh, sorry, your entrepreneurial paths. Thank you.
Yes. And
Yeah.
one thing, can I add one more thing? Sorry, that just came
Yeah,
up.
go ahead. Go ahead. Don't worry.
One thing I'd say is never don't feel guilty if you fail, things like that. All good advice, that I myself just said. But at the same time, don't suppress your emotions. Always, live your emotions. If you're feeling sad, that's okay. If you're feeling happy, embrace that. I oftentimes, once we got into Skydeck, which was Berkeley's top incubator, felt a lot of imposter syndrome. I was like, I'm a clown. I don't deserve to be having a startup in Skydeck. And but and I did have a little bit of imposter syndrome, and honestly it's something I still have and I'm working through. But it's just let yourself feel these emotions, embrace the moment, embrace the highs, embrace the lows, and move forward. Yeah.
Right. And with embracing emotions, you gain more control over yourself. So whatever you do, you will be successful in your own way. Right.
Yes.
So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, Hriday, for giving me this amazing once in a lifetime opportunity to interview you
Oh
about your
no, it's not a once in
accomplishments.
a lifetime opportunity. Anytime, dude. Thank you so much
Yeah,
for giving me the opportunity to be on the podcast. I really
yeah,
appreciate it. It's an
definitely.
honor. Um, it's been a great experience, and I hope that everyone listening, um, learned something.
Yeah, I hope everyone truly enjoys. With that, good night, y'all.